All right, I'm gonna remove the carburetor gas line. It's got a little clip here that you pinch together. Pull it back out of the way. Lets you slide the hose off. Put it up higher in the gas tank so the gas doesn't leak back down. This first nut right here is 7/16. So I got my 7/16 socket here. Gonna loosen that up. I got a little container here that I'm putting the nuts and bolts in so I don't lose any. This is the breather hose for the crankcase on the motor. We'll just take it off. Put that part in there too. This little nut is 8mm. The carburetor seems to be getting too much gas, which tells me that the float is sticking open and probably getting too much gas in the oil or in the rings itself, and then it will flood out and it won't start. It will act like it's flooded. So these two pins, loosen them up, take them off. If I don't want to clean this carburetor, I usually go on eBay for this 19.5 horse. There's a carburetor that you can usually buy for like $12, and then you won't have to go through the step. You'll just put the new carburetor on and you won't have to worry about rebuilding this one or cleaning it out. There's two little wires here on the bottom. We're going to unhook it. That's the fuel shut off for the mower. As soon as you turn the key off, it pops a little spring up and then shuts the fuel off to the carburetor. This here's the choke lever. We're going to take the choke lever off. We're going to take this throttle linkage off, and there's a spring on there. So now we have the carburetor off. It's kind of dirty, but it's not too bad a shape. We're going to take it, I'm going to soak it in some gasoline. I'm going to clean up the outside, and we're going to take the carburetor apart. All right, I'm back at the carburetor. I'm going to clean it. I had it soaking in the gas a while. We'll swish the gas around, try to clean most of the dirt off before we take it apart so we don't, cause more of a problem than we are. I'm going to take this carburetor and I'm going to blow it off with my air hose. I got rubber gloves on and safety goggles. I'm going to take it and I'm going to blow all the gasoline off it so it's dried off. First thing we want to do is take off this little part on the bottom here. It's usually a 1/2-inch wrench. This is a little plunger. This plunger is stuck. It should pop up and down freely. We'll have to work on it, clean it off, and soak it in the gas a little bit more. It should pop up. It's spring loaded, so when the coil, the electric is off on it, it pops this off and it shuts off the fuel, and then when you turn the key on, it sucks this down with a little magnet, electromagnet. So we're going to soak this in the gas. That's one of the parts we got to make sure that is working properly. These are Phillips screws on the bottom of here. Sometimes if you put a Phillips screwdriver in and try to turn them, they're so tight that they'll strip the threads out. So what I'm going to do is pre-loosen them with my pliers. I'm just going to grab a hold of the head here, pinch real hard, and then I'm going to loosen them. That one's loose now. Same thing on this side. I'm going to loosen them. Once I got them loose, then I can use the regular Phillips screwdriver. I won't have to worry about stripping out the heads on the Phillips screws if they're too tight. We'll go ahead and take the 2 screws out. There's a little spider gasket in there. Make sure we don't rip it. We want to make sure it comes off. The inside of the carburetor looks pretty clean, but we'll go ahead and clean it anyways. This plastic part comes off here. It's not too dirty. There's a little pin right here that comes out. This is your float. This floats up and down. And this is the needle. This shuts the fuel on and off. So we'll make sure we clean all these individual parts and make sure they're nice and clean. There is a little piece in here that goes in the bottom of this. That's where the shutoff shuts the gas off. We'll make sure that hole's not plugged up. A lot of times this hole will get plugged up. You'll have carburetor issues. I have my cleaning tools here. I'm going to clean it and soak it, and then when it's time to reassemble, we'll start back with the video. Alright, we're back from cleaning this carburetor. As you can see, there's many different little holes that can get plugged up with gunk. Holes back here, holes here, here, here. This butterfly was not working correctly for the choke. It should release when you put the choke on. It should pop back. That was frozen up, so I had to free it up with some oil, clean it real well. Some of these little holes right here in this top part were plugged up. Remember I showed you this part? It's supposed to pop out like that. This was froze up. I had to clean it out, oil it, clean it real good, and we'll test it to make sure it's working correctly. But you see how it's springing in and springing out. Before it wouldn't even move, and it was letting too much gas into the carburetor. I cleaned the float. I checked the needle here. There's a little rubber tip on the end of this needle. If it's all tore up, then it will let gas leak past the float when you gas is running through it. So the needle looks in good shape. I got it all cleaned up. There's a little part inside here. That little piece you got to make sure is in there before you assemble the carburetor back together. This part, this is called a spider gasket. Usually if it's in good shape, you can reuse the spider gasket. So I'm going to take this part. That little hole right there lines up with that fuel hole on that side. We'll spin it around here and make sure that little part's in the carburetor. And we're going to slide it down. That part goes just like that. All right. And take the float. You want the needle. The needle goes in this little slot here in the float. I'm going to hold that. You're going to line it up with this little hole. We're going to reassemble this little pin that holds the float. It's what the float goes up and down on. That should slide in there freely. Make sure the float's operating up and down. This is the cap that goes on there. You see how this little spider gasket's around the outside? You got to make sure that when you put this on, you want to move it around a little, make sure everything's in the right spot before you tighten up the screws. These can go on both ways. So we're going to line up the screws. We're going to start the screws in each hole. Put a little tension on each side. Before we tighten it up, we want to just make sure we tap it a little. Make sure that spider gasket